Welcome to episode 38 of The Pulpiteer. I'm your host, Eric Hepburn, and I'm glad to have you join us for today's episode. Today's podcast is entitled Women's Justice. It is a special service because I had the honor of sharing my pulpit this week with Sky Makare, a young woman from my congregation. There are a few references that I want to clarify up front before we get started. The anthem that's referenced in the service is the song Incomprehensible by the band Big Thief. And the title of Tarana Burke's autobiography that I reference is Unbound, My Story of Liberation and the Birth of the Me Too Movement. Let's get started. I'm going to tell a very short story about how today came to pass in its current form. Today I'm doing a joint service with Sky Makare. She is a 14-year-old young woman, a member of our congregation. And blessings come in many shapes and sizes and forms. So Mr. Spoon and I had just finished giving a service really trying to take a hard look at race through the lens of the magical Negro. And I knew that coming up in a couple weeks was a service where Keith and Aaron and I were going to try and do the same thing with masculinity. Take a topic that is hard and timely and fraught with peril and just really show up with an open heart and an open mind to that hard thing and be together in it. And I was hoping, I was feeling called to do something similar for Women's History Month. But I hadn't found the right partner to do that with. I had dialed some of the usual suspects, and they had expressed that they were not sharing that call. And after the service with Spoon, Sky walked up to me, looked me in the eye, and said, I want to do something just like that for Women's History Month. And that's how blessings happen. That's how blessings happen. Without further ado, I introduce to you Sky Makare.
Hello, I'm Sky Makare, and I am proud to be standing up here in front of all of y'all to talk about women's beauty, unjust treatment, and societal standards. The way women are treated today is still a long way from perfect, though my goal here is not to attempt to fix it, nor to diminish the struggles that men face, but to give you a new perspective, the perspective of a 14-year-old girl. How can beauty that is living be anything but true? That is the song you just heard for the anthem of this week. That line is a part of one verse of one of the most beautiful songs that I have ever heard. The verse goes, I'm afraid of getting older, that's what I've learned to say. Society has given me the words to think that way. The message spins in spirals, don't get saggy, don't get gray. But the soft and lovely silvers are now falling on my shoulder. My mother and my grandma, my great-grandmother too, they wrinkle like the river, they sweeten like the dew. And as silver as the rainbow scales that shimmer purple blue, how can beauty that is living be anything but true? So let gravity be my sculptor, let the wind shape my hair. Let me dance in front of people without a care. Let me be naked and alone with nobody there. Or with mismatched socks and shoes and stuff stuffed in my underwear. I cannot picture an ugly woman. I've trained myself to romanticize the flaws that make a woman quote unquote ugly, whether that be gap teeth, wrinkles, gray hair, muscles, belly rolls, or stretch marks. They've always been beautiful in my eyes. I want you to think of one thing that you find unattractive about yourself and start complimenting it. Your stomach proves that you've eaten well. Your stretch marks prove that you've grown. Your gapped teeth and smile lines prove that you smiled. Your gray hair has proved that you've lived a long life. So I say those are flaws. Stop putting yourself down and start thinking, is this a flaw or is this a blessing?
That section of Sky's writing, which I had the privilege to read earlier this week, brought up in me an echo of one of the most powerful passages that I've ever read. Brene Brown talks about reading passages that make her want to throw the book across the room. I don't often read a passage where I literally have to stop and take a minute, but I did in this one. It comes from Tarana Burke's autobiography. Tarana was probably the founder of the Me Too movement. She's an amazing activist, and I want to share her words with you. Quote, "Unkindness is a serial killer. Death in the flesh sometimes seems like a less excruciating way to succumb than the slow and steady venom unleashed by mean-spirited, cruel words and actions that poison you over time. I guess that's why I can't stand the old children's rhyme, 'Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me.' Every time I hear it, I think to myself, that's a lie. You can dodge a rock, but you can't unhear a word. You can't undo the intentional damage that some words have on your mind, body, and spirit, especially a word like ugly. There's a funny way that some people interact with those that they deem physically unattractive. Usually they stare for about a half a beat too long. When they are noticed, they smile a small, guiltily fading smile. Then their eyes dart away and their posture falls into an unsettling mix of toddler and chimpanzee, as if they don't know where to move next. Suddenly they are fascinated by the nothingness over your shoulder. I know this act all too well and have seen it so often that I can spot it in the split second it takes to pass a stranger on the street. I can read the slight readjustments as discomfort churns through their body. There is just a millisecond of disgust, sometimes offset by embarrassment, and then, if confronted by my brief, unrelenting stare, guilt. I know this because I'm ugly. At least that's what the world finds new ways to tell me every day. As a very young girl, I thought I was just as cute as any other little brown girl on my block. I was wrong. I remember when I first found that out. I was standing in line at the pharmacy, talking to this lovely father with his beautiful daughter. The little girl talked to me the whole time we were in line. Her father was engaged too. When they completed their purchase, the girl said goodbye, and so did her dad. They started to walk off, and I moved up in the line, but something made them stop within earshot. Perhaps he was counting his change or making sure he had everything before leaving. Whatever it was, I heard the little girl say, "Daddy, that little girl looks like a Maya, right?" Her father's tone, which had been so warm and friendly, was sharp and laced with hostility when he responded. It was a tone I would hear so many times over the next few decades. "No, she's too ugly to look like a Maya. Did you see how big her nose was? That girl is ugly." And then he laughed. The cut took some time to register. Was he talking about me? I paid for my purchase and walked back home feeling numb and dazed. I was embarrassed. Was I ugly? When I got to my room, I pulled out a small photo album my mother had bought me and looked at the few pictures I had tucked away in the side flaps. There was one of me posing and smiling at the camera, how I thought a model would. It was in a set of black and white pictures my mother's photographer friend snapped randomly one night. I studied and studied it. What did ugly even mean? No one had ever called me that before. I was tall and skinny and brown-skinned with full lips and what my Nana called a bell pepper nose. I had been teased about each feature, but put together they had never equaled ugly. I didn't understand, and I wanted to. I desperately wanted to. But the man and his beautiful girl were gone. They had left me to figure it out on my own. I ran over every part of our interaction, from the moment I stepped in the line to the last words I heard from his mouth. I ran it over and over, and I came to the same conclusion every time. I just didn't know. But the word was lodged in the back of my mind, and it reared its head with every bit of evidence collected. In the pharmacy, I remembered wondering if the dad would think I was some kind of troublemaker. I had made small talk to show him that I was a good girl. I was extra polite. I was extra kind to his daughter. I was a good girl, but I was still ugly to him. And ugly is like a disease to some people. They act as if they might catch your ugly if you get too close. They stare with resentment like it's your fault they have to see your face. Like you are forcing them to share in the shame they imparted upon you in the first place. This unkindness creates a particular kind of vulnerability. It makes the recipient ashamed, coercing us to be participants in our own torment. Somehow the world convinces us that its unkindness is the cost of admission for sharing space with the attractive, and we believe it. We don't just believe it, we welcome it, but in degree. Not usually with a grin and a wink, though sometimes we do, but mostly with a scowl, sometimes a foul word, sometimes an attitude, or even a few tears. But there is a small part of us that also feels alive and seen and grateful for that barely there acknowledgement. The flip side is being invisible, unseen, which is equally painful. And the thing is, either one will kill your spirit over time.
You are undoubtedly beautiful, but don't let anyone ever embarrass you for it. Catcalling has never and will never be considered a compliment. I would like to do a test and be completely honest, and you do not have to participate if you do not wish to do so. Men or men identifying, raise your hand if at any point in your life you have been catcalled. Women or women identifying, raise your hand if at any point in your life you have been catcalled. Notice how many more women have raised their hands as opposed to men. You may be thinking, Sky, this is a weird test. Women obviously get catcalled more than men. That's the point. It's so normalized in our society that most of you are unaffected by it. I remember the first time I was catcalled. I was walking to the gas station to get snacks with my best friend. We weren't wearing anything special, just jeans and a t-shirt. When we were walking back to my house, these two teenage boys drove by us in this huge truck and honked at us. The driver shouted sexually explicit comments towards me as the other boy made indistinct moaning noises behind him. I was 11 at the time. I was 11. From that point forward, I was terrified. So now I carry a pocket knife in my purse. When I'm home alone, I grab a kitchen knife before I go answer the door. And I purposely avoid men in grocery stores. And you know what? I shouldn't have to go through that because I am only 14 years old. No woman should ever have to go through that because it is barbaric and humiliating. But like I said before, it is normalized in our society.
I want you to just breathe with me for a minute. It's so easy to fall in this moment into predictable patterns. It's better now than it was, I swear. You think that's bad. I should tell you the story that happened to me. These kinds of stories are how we normalize things that ought not be normalized. It's how we come to make peace with that which does not wish us well. It's how we come to accept the unacceptable. As Sky and I were going back and forth about her writing, I found myself in this pattern. Now, I've stood in this pulpit and I've talked to you about, on Mother's Day last year, I talked about the toxic relationship that can exist between mothers and daughters, holding each other down. Holding each other down. The words that my mother said to my sister, "Oh, I'm sorry, dear, your brother got all the brains." She said to a woman who is now the president of the Chamber of Commerce in her town. I think she got her fair share. Rationalizing injustice and unfairness is a natural human response to try not to come out of your own skin. That doesn't mean it's the healthy response or the right one. So when you find yourself doing so, I just invite you to take one more step. Am I doing this so that I don't have to show up to the struggle to stop this injustice? Is my rationalization a way of letting myself off the hook for being present in this moment? Sky and I went back and forth about fairness and justice. There's a whole literature on justice as fairness. So I'll define it for you like this. Fairness and unfairness are what we experience. Justice and injustice are what we do. So when you witness an unfairness, that is only half of the equation. What you do in response to that unfairness either pushes the world towards more justice or does not, in which case you become complicit in the injustice. This is why we must call in, not call out, because all of us deserve healing.
How many Einsteins have spent their lives washing dishes? How many Mozarts have bent over stoves instead of pianos? All because they had the misfortune of being born a woman. This is a quote by the YouTuber that goes by Funky Frog Bait in her episode, The Trad Wives of TikTok. It is unjust that I am stereotyped not to be able to do certain things as a woman. It is unjust that I will not be guaranteed a fair salary because I am a woman. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, women on average make 16.4% less than men. It is unjust that I am not guaranteed to have safe and legal reproductive health because I am a woman. Because we all know how much the government cares about the children who women are forced to have, because there are 300,000 of them in foster care in the U.S. currently. It is unjust that what I am passionate about is overruled by the societal norms of being born a woman. But that is what I am expected to do in 2025. There are people who expect all women to give up my goals of going to college, getting a good job, supporting my family financially, and following through with my dreams, all so I can conform to American standards. It's not that I don't dream of being a mother and getting married. It's the fact that I'm scared to raise my future daughter in a country that expects her to silence who she wants to become. I will say it again. I'm only 14 years old. It is an injustice that I'm scared to have children or go on a walk past dark or wear the clothes that I feel confident in. This is what millions of women have to face across America. I am disappointed in what I have to live in, and I apologize to the women who have already lived through it.
Amen. Until next time, thank you for joining us on The Pulpiteer. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can help others find it by liking and subscribing. If you're so moved, you can even leave us a review. All reviews will be gratefully received. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can make a donation at sangabrieluu.org/give. The Pulpiteer podcast is a production of the San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Georgetown, Texas. The podcast is hosted by Spotify, and theme music is by John Faber. Our live recording tech crew is Frank Sanders, Rob Berthold, Keith Hutchinson, and Andrew McDaniel. Special thanks to Sky Makare and Tarana Burke for their contributions. The podcast is produced and performed by Eric Hepburn.